just realized what was different.
Yeah, last meeting was like that too.
Was it?
Yeah, because Cliff just commented about it. There was no barriers last meeting. I remember Cliff being like, "There's no barriers."
Right. Madam Mayor, counting down. 10, 9. 3, 2, and 1.
Thank you. Welcome to the City of Brisbane City Council meeting of Thursday, April 4th, 2024. It is 7:36, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please join me in the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Excuse me, roll call vote, please.
Madam Mayor, we have no request under roll call A. Councilmember Cunningham?
Here.
Councilmember Davis?
Here.
Councilmember Lentz?
Here.
Councilmember Mackin?
Here.
And Mayor O'Connell.
Here. Can we get a report out from the closed session from the city attorney, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor. The council was provided an update on the environmental litigation between the city and High Speed Rail. There was no action asked for, no action taken.
Thank you. That moves us to adoption of the agenda. Council received a request to close in memory of Father John Baliza, who passed away unexpectedly on Easter morning. He was the parish priest for Our Lady of Guadalupe Mission. Can I get a first and a second to adopt the agenda as amended?
So
All in
moved.
favor?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And that brings us to oral communications number 1. Is there a member of the public wishing to make public comments on an item not on the agenda? Seeing none in the audience, do we have anyone online?
No hands raised, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. That brings us to the consent calendar. Councilmember Mackin would like to pull consent calendar item B to a later council meeting. Can I get a first and second to approve consent calendar C through G?
So moved.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. That brings us to new business, item H. Receive a mid-year budget report and consider adoption of resolution amending the annual budget for fiscal year 2023-24 and making appropriations for the amount budgeted. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. There will be a slide deck. Okay, great. Yes. Thank you for this opportunity to review the projections of this fiscal year. These projections are based on results through February, accounting for known changes and best estimates available. Before we do a review, I just wanted to refresh our memories, especially for our guests online, that as far as the conditions that were present when the budget was being prepared. So we prepared the budget in April 23, approved in June, and during that time, the economic climate had several uncertainties resulting from coming out of COVID. There were rising costs and increases in federal borrowing rates throughout the year. City Hall had gradual reopenings throughout fiscal year 2023, so that was impacting some of the programming estimates that we had at that time. And then also in early 2023, if we all remember that New Year's weekend where there were major storms that impacted our city, where we needed to have several repairs made to deal with the roads and just the storm drains in several areas within the city that we had to prepare for. So at the time when we were preparing the budget, the council challenged staff to identify expense items for savings to either place on hold for 6 months until revenues were known, or to delay or limit the expenses for half the year where possible, and then also to find expenses that could be delayed into fiscal year 2025. Next slide. So before you is a graph of revenues and expenditures over the years, just to remind us of how the city has treated revenues and expenses for budget purposes. Staff's position is to budget revenues for conservative growth, excluding one-time revenues. So at times we may expect to have a use of funds, but after the actual results come in, we've seen per the graph that the revenues have been exceeding the planned expenditures at the end of the fiscal year. We may have benefited from one-time revenues, but revenue sources remain strong and are still growing. So it wasn't other than fiscal year 2022, where we were coming out of COVID, expenses have historically fallen below the revenue amounts. So the city doesn't have a use it or lose it philosophy. So this allows management to make better decisions and also to project their costs more effectively. Next slide. So for the budget of 23-24, we see that our revenues are exceeding our budgeted amounts. So now we are projecting $28,891,077, and our expenditures are coming projected better than budget for a total of $28,078,493. So where we thought we were going to have to dip into our fund balance, we are finding that now we are able to, we are expecting to project a use, not so much a use of funds, but a net positive result of $813,000. So with that, we are able to reproject our ending fund balance to over $16,440,000, almost $48,000. So the next few slides will review what has led to these changes in projected year-end results. Next slide. So let's start with revenue. For our mid-year revenue, we're seeing an overall favorable to budget amount of $2.2 million. The main driver is an increase in our property taxes. So with the build out at Sierra Point, we're continuing to see increases in property taxes, primarily an increase in the successor agency property tax. So that has grown up to, for this past year, we're expecting $856,000 just for that portion alone in excess. The next area is permitting and park and recreation fees. So with the growth in Sierra Point, the permitting fees continue to grow. And with that, we're seeing a growth of $373,000. And also, now that we are resulting out of COVID, we're seeing an active programming participation for the parks and recreation programs. The next area we've seen sales taxes continue to grow. Our county pool allocation, although during COVID we were exceeding 5%, we are now at the pre-COVID levels, maintaining around 3% for the county pool. We've had several one-time spikes for large purchases out in the Sierra Point businesses. And also, we're seeing a growth of about 4% in sales taxes. Unfortunately, this line item also includes the new tax that was enacted in November 22, which we're falling short of what we expected by about 440,000. So it's lowering the sales tax total number. So that's why you'll see a decrease of about 337,000 in sales taxes. But what's promising is that the sales taxes in general continue to grow, and we're seeing a strong presence there. And lastly, for the main drivers in the revenue increase are the business licenses. So we are seeing the businesses, as they're coming out of COVID, that's affecting the numbers they're projecting and the license fees that they pay on. So we're seeing an overall increase about 316,000 up to 5.6 million. So this year we have a new processor. We've partnered with HDL to administer our business license program. So it went into effect January of this year. So it's going to take about another quarter to evaluate the program, their collection process, and any discovery that they will be doing on our behalf. And the other component of business licenses that went up is the hotel business license tax. This is separate from TOT. It is a business license tax that was also enacted in November 22. And this is actually performing better than expected. And so it's grown to, for this year, we're expecting almost 300,000 from this component alone. Next slide. Another area we've been keeping an eye on is the transient occupancy tax, otherwise known as TOT. So before you, there's a graph from revenues dating from 2019, which was pre-COVID. And so we were budgeting up to about 3 million each year for TOT for the 2 hotels in Brisbane. Unfortunately, it's pretty drastic what you've seen during COVID. Not only as a result of COVID, but also because conferences started to move away from San Francisco, which also impacted the hotel industry here in Brisbane. And so in 2020, and especially in 2021, we saw a drop down to less than $1 million. This reduced our budget as low as 1.7 for the subsequent years. As we heard in the Economic Development Report at last meeting, although the occupancies are growing, it's not expected to return to pre-COVID levels within the next year, possibly more. So in 2023, we actually did see a blip in early fiscal year 2023 as far as the actual occupancy tax. However, we haven't seen over the same period of this fiscal year, we did not see those occupancies repeated. So therefore, we're projecting a decrease in the TOT. So by year end, we expect a drop of about $100,000 for a total of 1.8 million. Next slide. Moving on to expenses. So we are reprojecting that our expenses will be down to 28.1 million. We do not recommend an adjustment at this time, although we are projecting that we will find savings in our expenses, and therefore combined with the increase in revenues, we will see a net revenue at the end of the year. So how did we find these savings? As discussed, we were challenged to come up with savings of $550,000 we were able to revisit our expenses and identify that we could potentially, that we're expecting to save approximately $521,000. We've had hiring delays, including the assistant city manager and historian, that aren't expected to be fulfilled before July. That's in addition, obviously, to the delay in the new city manager appointment. Several programs are not expected to start until fiscal year 25, resulting in savings, and those were particularly in planning. And finally, there were several departments that limited their travel and were able to utilize continued practice of virtual trainings, decreasing those expenses further. So again, we're not recommending an adjustment at this time because we just want to make sure that we are in a good position if there are unexpected costs, including if we don't receive expected coverage for the storm costs that we have requested from FEMA. Moving to the next slide. So for the fund policy recommendations, we're starting with a fund balance of $16.4 million, but our fund balance policy requires us to set aside funds as noted. So we have the recession reserve, a reserve for unanticipated events, the annual fluctuation reserve component for a total of almost $7.6 million. So just as a side note, this year we were seeking financing for the City Hall Annex, and part of the report that we received from the rating organization, S&P Global, commented on our strong reserves and policies. So it's very important and very laudable that the city has implemented these restrictions on our fund balance so that we can plan for future. So you will notice that there are additional restrictions of $6.5 million. Those include any assets that aren't converted to cash easily, such as loans receivable or prepaids. Also, any restrictions we have for the enhanced pension plan, the assigned fund balance for restricted purposes, such as the sinking fund, multi-year contracts that we have in place, and any other encumbrances, such as expected transfers for capital projects. So with those additional limitations on our fund balance, we're expecting to be left with available fund balance of $1,099,163. Next slide. So with that, we are recommending that the council approve the budget adjustment resolution to address the revenue increase that we're expecting. And we also want to reconvene on our plan to fund the pension trust. And so we're asking to once again begin to contribute $500,000 to the pension trust, and any remaining balance we are asking that we consider to be rolled over for 24-25 budget. Next slide. Just as a reminder of a picture of our debt that we have in place. We had several items that dropped off in fiscal year 23, but we also earlier this fiscal year sought out an additional bond issue for the City Hall Annex. So currently the governmental funds are paying, have a total debt of $15,286,000 through the year of 2043. So those are items that we have restricted for our funds. And the next slide. The items that we're considering for the next budget year, which is why we're asking that these funds be considered to be rolled over, is that we still have in place employee contracts that include raises through 2026. Insurance costs are expected to continue to rise. There was a savings that our current coverage was able to experience through CalPERS. However, the recommendation is that with CalPERS, they're usually seeing any increase in costs are usually on a delay because CalPERS is such a big moving force with the insurance companies. So others may see insurance costs rise before we would. So now, the next few years, as we all have seen insurance costs go up for whether it's general liability or health in general, it's something that we need to keep considering and having a plan in place. The hotel sector, as we saw in the earlier graphs, is not expected to recover to pre-COVID levels, so we can't rely on those additional revenues. The fluctuating prices of fuel, goods, and services, the duration of those price increases, or fluctuating prices rather, are still unknown. We have continued construction on Sierra Point that can help us with revenues, but a lot of the costs related are in future years. So we collect the revenues up front, and some of the costs in order to address several of the permitting processes happen in later years, and the building of management of those costs. Next, we also have the impact of the unfunded liabilities. Each year, we see fluctuation depending on how the underlying assets perform. So we've been fortunate to see some good years. The previous year was not so beneficial to us, but again, every year is its own. So you take it as each year's asset performance occurs, then we address the related costs to the city. And then finally, the U.S. fiscal policies on our economic environment. As we all know, it's a presidential election year, so that can have very interesting impact on the costs that we will see and on the investment environment. So with that, that's all the presentation, but obviously I will take your questions at this time.
Thank you so much. Questions for staff? Colleen, do you want to go first?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have some clarifications, and thank you very much for this really comprehensive presentation. So I'm going to just kind of go all over the map. These are easy things. On attachment A, under the total revenue budget adjustments, I see property tax, and then I see sales tax. And the sales tax is indicated at $336,728, which is pretty much alluding to the shortfall you indicated of $337,000. Underneath that, it says franchise tax, and I could not understand what the franchise tax was. Is that the use and transaction tax?
Those are taxes that are paid by PG&E, cable, marina. I think I'm missing one.
Okay,
Yeah.
so those are the
Yes,
okay,
yeah.
so it's different. Got
It's
it.
different.
Okay, because I was looking at the 93,000 and wondering, what is that referencing? Okay, thank you for that. And then, let's see here. Sales tax. So we had a sales tax increase in 2023, and a large portion of that was also supposed to cover staff increases. And since the sales tax is down, is our sales tax covering those staff increases?
Sales tax alone, not the use tax, but the sales tax is actually growing less than the increase of this past year's
Okay. At this time?
at this time.
Okay. And it's anticipated to grow, but at this time, it's
It is
just.
less than,
Okay.
yeah. If you're looking at that one line item.
Right,
yes.
okay. And we're heading into 2024. We anticipate at some point we'll have a new city manager. We're really fortunate to have an interim city manager. There may be an overlap. Do we have money budgeted for an overlap in compensation to two city managers as such? Or is that something, where would that come from?
So we did have budgeted for the city manager to be in place earlier in the year.
Okay,
Some of the savings that we had for some of the benefits that have dropped off can cover a portion of that. And we also had budgeted for a short crossover.
gotcha. Okay. And there was, in the city manager's budget, there were funds for an assistant city manager, and I believe we diverted those because we were anticipating the shortfall. But is that now, are those available that would help cover?
Yes, those are part of the 500,000 savings. I mean, obviously not the whole
Right,
thing,
right,
but.
right. I know what you're
But,
talking
right.
about.
So at the time of the budget, we had anticipated that we wouldn't need a full year
Mm-hmm.
of assistant city manager because it would take some time for them to appoint whoever they wanted. But even now, it doesn't appear that they will be in place before July. So we are including that as part of the savings.
Okay. And under business license tax, in the middle of that paragraph, it says cities projecting hotel business license tax will exceed budget by 49,000. Is that business license tax purely what we have collected? Does it have anything to do with a lawsuit settlement in that amount?
The lawsuit settlement is not included in that. That
Okay.
is purely the,
So that-
the new
Okay,
tax.
good, that's good. And then we have, okay, now I'm on to the recommended transfer to the pension trust. That at this time is not included in this mid-year budget, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so when we look at the
The 1
1.099, that would be reduced down to about 500,000.
correct.
Okay. And I'm almost done. Other notable events, American Rescue Plan, and then we go into atmospheric river storms. The large storms were January of 2023. So some of those expenses may have been covered in the prior fiscal year budget.
Correct.
However, we had a VACTOR that came this fall, which puts us into this budget. Are we still, are all the expenses pertaining to those storms reflected in this mid-year budget that were attributable to this fiscal year? Are they in there yet?
No, they're not because they were part of another fund.
Okay.
So
What
with
fund would that be?
capital expenses.
Okay,
So considering that we're expecting reimbursement for a portion. And so we've negotiated quite a bit of coverage for those expenses, but there are some components that we do not have full acceptance yet
Right.
from FEMA.
so in the meantime, we've covered those?
Yes,
Okay, and we've covered those out of,
if they are not covered by FEMA, then the general fund would have to cover.
okay.
Yes.
And this is something that perhaps our city manager might have to ask. So when we look at projected costs of 2.5 million on the atmospheric river storms and the anticipation that FEMA may reimburse 1.9 million. Can we have a status update, anticipated timeline on that? And then also we have Cal Office of Emergency Services. I'm assuming that's what that acronym is?
Yes.
Yes?
Right.
And that, it's not listed, but I'm assuming that's 600,000.
The difference?
Yeah,
Yes,
the difference.
yes.
Okay. So can we have a timeline on both of these? Are we looking at a year, 2 years? Is it going into the next fiscal year? And if we don't know, I'm just curious where this is at.
My understanding is that we've been approved, and it's going through the process
By whom?
through FEMA, and it now needs to go through state OES before it gets to us. So it's a two-step process. It's been approved, and I believe we anticipate the funds will happen in fiscal 24, 25.
And,
If not
portion,
this year.
A
Yeah.
portion, yes.
Yeah.
and the full amount was approved?
I think we got everything recovered in terms of the storm drain cleaning project. I think that was approved, and I think was one item, I think Randy told me that was like $40,000 or $50,000 that we're still haggling about.
Right.
But we
Okay.
got almost everything that we submitted approved.
Okay, so we may not have the full 1.9, but we're
Close.
anticipating.
Yeah.
Okay, and then how about Cal OES?
They're just the agency that actually will pay us, but it's FEMA money, basically.
Oh, okay. Okay, so that's all part of the same.
Correct.
All right, and that may be,
Can I just follow up on that real quick? Do you mind? So then there's 600,000 outstanding, right? So we spent 2.5. We've got 1.9, and then we're still waiting on to clarify because you said
Yeah, it's
like,
smaller,
there's
it's
still
smaller
we're
dollars.
expecting to get 1.9, but what about we're expecting to also get the remaining 600,000? What did you say?
No. So you're always going to get just a portion
Okay.
of the total that you expend, but there's a couple smaller projects that are still being negotiated that's outside of the 1.9. So it would reduce it further. And then there are components now that allow for additional administrative costs. So that 600 difference could be reduced. And we're probably talking maybe 100,000.
But there still be an
Yes.
outstanding amount that we need to cover from general fund.
Correct.
And
Yeah,
if there's
Or
I would
unless.
say, just so that you get a feel for the way this works, I mean,
Okay.
this is, when we submit claims, it's a fully loaded cost. So, I mean, we've got, maybe I shouldn't say this on the record, but we've got the kitchen sink in there, right? So we get a pretty good level of reimbursement. As you know, we had a lot of staff time involved in that. We had contractor time in that. Most of that got reimbursed. But I think there's probably some aspects of it that, that didn't. So, I mean, for example, my time wouldn't have been recovered, and some of the administrative time wouldn't have been
Right.
recovered. Carolina's time wouldn't have been recovered. But a lot of, the field workers, and that kind of direct service
our
level.
hard expenses.
Yeah, our hard expenses, most of that has been paid for out of last year's budget, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So then the other component is if we would be able to go to another agency and seek some of that coverage,
Okay.
which is, my understanding is another plan for. So it is a good possibility that 600, the difference would be further reduced.
okay.
Yeah.
And I have one final question, which is, we had delayed projects to save funds. Have any of those delayed projects, because I looked back on them and some of them, they were delayed, but they said, there were things even pertaining to our police department that they felt things that would arrive in March. So have any of these delayed projects actually moved forward? And if so, are they reflected, those expenditures reflected in these amended expenses?
Yes. So what we looked at were all of the items that were identified for savings. But just to be clear, some of them were put on hold for 6 months. But if they were to go forward, they would be at 100%. It wasn't like they were gonna be just 50% of the cost. There were some, however, like if we were delay hiring, then half of it is savings off the bat. So we did look at all of those items, and there were also other programs that, like the training, where we were able to find additional savings to kind of offset those items that were put on hold for 6 months but had to be put into, had to be implemented.
So do we have any still on hold, or does that mean since it was
Yes.
6 months that,
So part of the new number, I believe it was 521, included several projects that they were able to delay into fiscal year 25.
okay, and those are probably capital improvements, some of those from that list?
Some planning programs
Oh,
that they
okay.
identified that they could put on hold. An example was the B of A Parkside planning, because
Right.
it hasn't even been brought forth to you yet.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Madison, do you have any other questions? No.
All right. Well, I do have quite a few questions. Maybe if someone else wants to ask some questions, then I'll have less to ask. So, but I can go.
Go ahead.
All right. So, thank you, Carolina, for the update, and it feels comforting to know that our finances are on solid ground, and your data backs that up. So, on page 2, it says staff anticipates that additional revenue will be generated as the life science campus projects are completed. So, the phase 3 project, I guess it's considered done. I don't know if it's finalized, but will that particular property continue to be reassessed and be finalized sometime in the future?
Yes, so with each different section, then it gets reassessed as they're completed. If there are additional projects that, if they're allowed to proceed, in future years, it continues to add to the assessed value of that location.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I mean, the two potential ones, I mean, those are potential, but of course, the phase 3 one, that one's
right.
done, so,
Right.
but you're saying that
Because
there's
it's about a year lag.
a year lag?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so then we should anticipate more revenue from Sierra Point.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. So, like sometimes people feel that, life sciences, they don't provide revenue to the city. And it's true that they usually don't provide sales tax, but they have provided a significant amount of property tax, and there's business license tax and other money that comes in. I mean, you're talking about 856,000 more this year, and that mostly came from Sierra Point, correct?
Correct.
All right. Carolina, could you explain, why the use and transaction tax is gonna be less than expected? I know it's new, and maybe that's the reason, but if you can just kind of tell us, and then if by having this information, does that now allow you to project, in a more confident way moving forward?
I think so. We have to remember that the use tax is for goods that stay within the city. And unfortunately, when it is a smaller city, those aren't going to stretch as far. So we had projections based off of the sales tax that we have, but it's a different way, it's a different method of revenue coming in, because for a regular sales tax, if they're ordering here or if they're purchasing here, but it could land somewhere else, right? Use tax is for the goods that are here, delivered here.
Okay.
So,
So if
so now
someone-
with better history, we can, if we need to reduce the projections, we'll have better information with better history now.
Okay, so say someone purchased a car online, and then that car is delivered here. Is that where the tax kicks in?
For vehicles, it is different, so I believe, yes, that those would be here. So as EVs, people start buying or, changing their cars, then we will see those here. Even though we don't have a car
A
dealership here.
dealership, right? But
Right,
we
but the
would get
vehicles would be
the
here.
tax from that.
Yes.
Okay, that's pretty cool. If you could explain the pension trust, it's sometimes it could be a little confusing. We're not paying something down; we're just putting something into a kind of like a rainy day pension trust or fund. So, yeah, if you wouldn't mind explaining why we do that.
So as our employees have a pension plan in place for their different plans available, depending on how long the employee has been working here. There was a change in 2013 that reduced the pension benefits. So, but we do have a group of employees that when they retire, they're going to be entitled to certain benefits. And so in the past, cities didn't have to put money away to save for that. But now governments are required to disclose what that liability would be and to plan for it. And so what we have done, every year those numbers change because there's a different value depending on who's in the plan, life expectancy. There's a whole valuation on what the benefits would cost to the city. And then again, investments in that plan help pay for that, as well as the contributions that we make every year. However, what we've done is we've set up a trust so that the funds cannot be used for anything else. Once they're contributed into that trust fund, they can only be used to pay and cover pension costs. And so that's to plan ahead, because we've seen other cities fall into a position where they can't afford, and then, the retirees you're out of luck, so to
Okay.
speak.
No, that makes sense. And then the goal is to eventually get that up to about $5 million.
Correct. So what that does is at least gives the city 2 years' worth, that if operations got so dire, if our revenues became so low, at least we could cover 2 years' worth of those costs through the trust.
To the trust. Okay. Okay. No, that
So
makes
that's
sense.
why we want to build it up. And again, it is a recommendation that S&P wanted to see, that we continue to return to that policy.
Okay. All right. And then we would, as a council, consider that during our 24-25 budget hearings.
Correct.
All right. And when do you anticipate that we would conduct those hearings?
So our goal is to have later in May come before you with the budget request. So the 500,000 that we're recommending now is for fiscal year 24 out of the expected savings that we are seeing, or we're projecting rather. And then in 24-25 we will bring it again.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. So you are asking for something from us tonight, and that is it, to make a change to the
So that if
20
if
to
for
the
24,
23-24
yeah, for
budget.
if the savings that we're projecting come to fruition, that the first 500,000 would be used towards a pension contribution.
Okay. Okay. And then I know that the American Rescue Plan Act was brought up, but so we have, like $1.1 million that we received. It looks like we've only spent $200,000 of it. In the staff report, it says the city has until 12/31/24 to determine how to use the remaining balance. So, are you going to provide us some options and give us kind of a roadmap for how we should be spending this money before the time runs out?
So as part of the budget proposal for 24-25, we will include some of the guidelines because there are some restrictions on those funds on how to use them. So we will provide that information at that time. Staff and council had decided to put those funds on hold until either we had a immediate use or need for it, or so that we could have the best opportunity on how to use it. So with next year, we
Better
have
start
to
using
have a
it,
plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense.
So now it's like, okay, now that we have to put it in place and commit, you don't have to spend it immediately, but you have to commit to how you're going to use it
Commit.
by the end of the year.
By the end of the year,
Yeah.
okay, and then I guess we'll have like
Some kind of decision.
and you'll let us know at the meeting, like how much time after we commit.
Yes,
to-
so they have to be spent in 2026.
By 2026, okay. All right. You brought up the information about our bond funding for City Hall Annex, and the comments that were made by S&P Global Ratings, and so the first two statements or bullet points, excuse me, it says high property wealth and income indicators highlighted by the continuing expansion of industry. And then it says strong financial profile with available reserves that are expected to grow over the next fiscal year. So, this is a third party, a very well respected third party evaluator. Just based on that, it seems that the city is on pretty solid financial grounds, base. Do you feel confident with that as well?
I agree that the city is well-positioned to cover the operating costs that we have, and we'll see continued growth to at least plan and be protected for unforeseen challenges that we will face.
Okay. Yeah, in this, like when you go to attachment 1, and you did a great job with laying out, what was projected and then what were the actuals. It's interesting, you look at the fiscal year 21-22, and so we had a reduction in the fund balance from 17,536,000 to 15,200. But part of the reason why we had the high fund balance was because we had a spike in like COVID-19 pandemic sales tax.
Sales tax, correct.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Because it seems like the fund balance typically has been fairly steady for a while.
Yes.
Yeah, but then sometimes you get these spikes, and then so you get this high amount, and then it goes away, and then you bring in less, and sometimes it feels like, oh, look at it, we dropped so much. There's you can have a higher level of concern rather than what actually is occurring. It's just that there was a spike in
Right.
something that then caused that next year to have a lower amount.
But as we saw in the graph with the revenues versus expenses throughout the years, it wasn't until that year where we saw that we had to dip into the fund balance.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, I thought that was really interesting. So 9 out of the last 10 years. And in the main reason, again, was that there was just a spike in the revenue from sales tax.
From the, well, that would contribute to the beginning fund balance being
Yeah,
higher, yes.
being higher. Yeah, okay. So then, the reserve policy, and I want to kind of touch upon that. So, so I'll tell you, can you tell me the difference between we have a fund balance and then we have reserves? And so sometimes that I think can be a little confusing. And so if you can maybe explain the difference in what is a reserve and what's a fund balance and.
So the reserves are part of the fund balance. So you can look at it as the difference between your assets and what you immediately owe is what you have available in reserves, or not available, in reserves. Part of those are restricted because you have future commitments, and then also part are restricted because not all of your assets can you turn around and use it as cash to pay out.
Sure.
Right. So that's what your differences are. But we look at available is like what you have on hand as cash, so to
Sure.
speak.
So, correct me if I'm wrong here. So when I look at that one year that had the fund balance drop by over $2 million, we still maintained our reserves, or that we have agreed to as a council, and we also had the additional restrictions. Even with that loss, we still had $943,000 that the council could have spent if it wanted to.
Correct.
All right, so okay, and then in the 22-23 $990,000, we could have spent that as well, but the council opted to just maintain, or maybe had spent on some items.
Well,
Hard to say.
you have a delay because
Okay.
of the results. You won't know until a few months later.
Yes.
Right? So then it allows council to look at the future budget year to see if they want to use some of that for the next fiscal planning, right?
Got it. Yep. Yep. So now we're at this 23-24. We got the $1,099,000. You're asking us, hey, let's put $500,000. You feel confident enough, put $500,000 into the trust.
Right.
Okay. So I'm getting it. So thank you
No,
for
I appreciate
for
that.
holding my hand through this. Okay. You know what? That's it for me.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
My turn. Thanks, Carolina. I'll be brief. So, speaking of the TOT, we're actually down $1 million from pre-COVID. And you said that it's really not looking to pick up anytime soon. What information can you give us about why that is? I know it's not just Brisbane. But
Right.
What's going on that there's not confidence that this is going to pick up anytime soon? Is it Airbnb? Is that part of it, or what are the factors?
It could be, but again, our hotel occupancy was significantly impacted with conferences in San Francisco.
Okay.
So as they move to Vegas or other cities, we're not getting that overflow of the hotel rooms, or we were a cheaper option than
Right.
staying in San Francisco.
And so that spillover was our entire county.
Yeah.
Because they're hearing the same kind of,
Right, and us being in juxtaposition, logistically, we're so close to San Francisco, we would get a good benefit of that.
do we think that it might be helped that we've got these bigger organizations going out at Sierra Point now, that they might make up a little bit of that difference?
Yes, because part of the occupancy has been for folks that are working on those projects, that they're filling some of those vacancies, especially with the long-term
Sure.
Homewood Suites. We
Yep,
saw
yep.
that, so.
Okay. Okay, you also said that the $7.6 million in reserve is not enough. What can we do?
I'm sorry.
The reserve is $7.6 million. Obviously, any catastrophic event could eat that up real quick. Any suggestions on what we can do?
Oh,
Anything else we can trim? Anything else we can do to increase our income, which is what we really need to do?
I don't think I'm saying it's not enough. I want to make sure that that wasn't a message. What I can measure is what we need for the current year,
Okay,
and if our revenues are sufficient for that.
okay,
So,
that's it, and thanks very much.
okay.
I have one question, Harry, actually. So going back to the ARPA funds, I know that the rental relief amount that we allocated, because we talked about how like there's still money in there. And I don't know
Oh,
if it's,
that was from the housing fund?
yeah, is it YMCA that's distributing? So where did that, can you remind me where that came? That
So
came from?
those funds were from the housing fund.
Affordable housing.
Yes, or the low-income housing fund is, yeah.
And
which-
then, we also gave $10,000 grants, I think, or up to $10,000 grants to nonprofits impacted by COVID. I think that Mountain Watch may have gotten one of those, or maybe BDW too. Do you know where that didn't come out of ARPA? That came out of somewhere else?
Yeah, what came from ARPA were the small business grants.
That's the only thing. Okay. So the other ones came out of general fund then? The $10,000?
Those could have, I'd have to confirm, I would, yeah, I'd have to confirm, but I believe they were general fund, just, contributions. So I can,
Okay.
so it was Watch,
It was for nonprofits. Because all of these things, I mean, I think we offered because they were COVID. All of these things were COVID impacts, right? And so, yeah, I'd be curious. I mean, I know this is going to come back, but I'd be curious to really have an understanding of like what we can actually use the ARPA funds for, considering there's a good amount in there still.
we
correct?
were,
We used some of that. Have we used some of that for other things?
no, not
internally?
yet,
And others-
until council has an
Okay.
opportunity to review how they would like to use it. It was a conscious decision to put it on hold until we really needed it, which
Yeah.
we haven't shown to, or have to use it
Yeah.
before the deadline.
Okay.
So now it's our last chance to commit. There are different restrictions on how you can use it, but ours will be less restricted because we don't have like a hospital or anything like that. So it's a general city. So it'll, I think, allow a little bit more opportunity for how you would like to use it.
Thank you. On your slide, under revenues, you had permitting and park and recreation fees. Those seem like two very different revenues, and I'm wondering if you can give us a breakdown on how much was permitting for new construction and how much was actually park and revenue fees.
I don't have it
Increases.
with me. I just have it combined because all the fees and charges are lumped into one line item. I could get that for you if you'd like more detail on that.
Okay, it just seems like an odd grouping for,
Oh,
construction fees.
right. It's because they're all lumped as fees and services. Fees and charges is all one
But some of
area.
those could be in planning and public works type of issues, and some are in park and rec, and I think that having those two separate would be
Okay.
good.
And some you saw drops offset with increases. So I could further break down for you if you'd like.
Yeah, it just looks like it's, that we got quite a bit from those two funds, but it doesn't show which one contributed.
Okay.
And then, one of the things that Councilmember Lentz brought up about, having more in our fund balance than we had anticipated, which is a good thing. But we still have major unfunded pension liabilities and loans. Can you tell me how much those would be if we were to have to pay those off?
The loans, so as of now, our debt, I believe was slide 10.
You had a slide on it.
The outstanding debt that we have now, just in the governmental funds, this is not utilities or anything like that, is 15.2 or 15.3 million
Okay,
in debt through 2043.
but that's
So
not our unfunded liabilities.
those are bonds and loans strictly. The unfunded liability just for the next fiscal year is about 2.5 million. And every year as the investment returns come into play, it impacts another layer of that unfunded liability. So we tend to look at it kind of as a year-to-year basis because your current year revenues will help pay for the next round.
But still, it's not like we have this giant surplus in the bank that we can just go spend willy-nilly.
That is correct. I mean, there are long-term commitments, long-term liabilities, especially with the pension would be the biggest one. And it's a
Right.
moving target.
Yes, thank you. That's my only questions for now. Thank you very much. With that, can we move to public comment? Or would we like to go to discussion first?
I think public
Public
comment
comment.
first.
Okay. Do we have any members of the public that would like to speak on this issue?
If you'd like to speak on this item, would you please use the hand raised function? Madam Mayor, I see no hands raised.
Okay, thank you. So that we'll close the public hearing and we will go into discussion. Who wants to kick us off?
I'm gonna go sit down.
Thank you.
I will, Madam Mayor.
Sure.
I'm happy with this. I really appreciate the report and all the detail and your patience with our questions. And I would, if everyone else is ready, I would move to adopt the resolution to amend the fiscal year 23-24 budget.
Second.
I have no more comments.
I'm good.
Okay. With that, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Seeing none. Thank you so much for this. Thank you so much for that. That brings us to city manager's report on upcoming activities.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to give you a week off. My communications manager's out of town, and I got nothing to provide to you.
How about that?
Thank you so much. And then we have county-wide assignments and committee reports. And I know I have something here on that.
I can start.
Sure, go ahead.
Councilmember Cunningham and I met with the as the Public Art Advisory Committee. We met with our consultants for the Public Art Master Plan, 9 Arts. They came to Brisbane. They actually were supposed to come like a month or so before, and then they weren't able to catch a flight out of Denver because the weather was so bad. But they rescheduled, which was good because it was we had great weather and they were able to really soak in all of Brisbane. Staff took them to look at our existing art collection, but also had them walk the Crocker Trail, because that's been something that's been identified as a place for potentially a lot of murals, and showed them like different sites that we could have art go in the future. They also, so they kind of got a real sense of Brisbane, and then with the committee, they wanted to understand how we perceive our existing collection and how we what we value in terms of how we want the collection to evolve. Do we want, it to reflect Brisbane? Do we want it to be all local artists? Do we want to have, international acclaim? What's really the goal behind our public art program? So we all actually had like an interactive survey, and the question would come up and we would all submit our responses, and then we would be able to see on the screen what everyone else said. It was more, some was like ranked different things, some was short answer. It was really interesting because we were so aligned. But what was great about it is that there weren't any like voices dominating the conversation because everyone gave their input anonymously, and then we got to see where everyone was at. So it wasn't like someone made a really good point and then everyone else said, oh yeah, I just agree with that. We were all really encouraged to give our perspectives. But it was interesting to see that we were also aligned, but it was also a little bit predictable because we work very well together as a team. And what we did is they showed all these examples of different kinds of art and wanted us to give our gut reactions, whether we liked it, loved it, hated it, so they could start to get a sense of what art we were inherently attracted to, because art is so subjective, right? And the next day they met with a group of stakeholders, most of them artists in our community and people that have been involved in the public art process in the past. And a lot of their responses, I'm told, mirrored what the public art committee responded with. And a lot of the same art that we loved, they loved, and that we hated, they hated. So it's very interesting to, have all that data, to see how some of these stakeholders and then where the Public Art Advisory Committee landed. It really started a vision and like a taste level, so to speak, or an attraction to certain kind of art in Brisbane started to emerge. Of course, this is just like in the beginning phases, but they intend to come back in June or July, and go to probably a farmer's market, go to a concert in the park, really be in the community to get feedback from people and see how our spaces are used, so that instead of just having like a survey that the city is pushing out, they're going to go to people and places where we have kind of diverse, like we have a lot of different, community members. Like Concerts in the Park is the perfect example because you have young families, but you also have elderly people, and everyone kind of converges in one place so that they can get varied responses instead of just, maybe like the core people that always will respond to a survey we put out. So I felt really good about them as a consultant. We were really vibing, and I just love the way that they were gathering information from us. Do you want to add anything to that?
Just that it was a very dynamic, two-way street experience for everybody involved. And to think the diversity of the second group that were interviewed coming up with the same answers that we came up as the core group was very interesting indeed.
I think they also really they like the existing pieces in our collection, and they also felt like so many places are an incredible opportunity or a blank slate. And they said that a lot of times they work with cities that have all of this art already before they come up with a public art master plan, and there's no true identity or cohesiveness, or like there's kind of some weird stuff that's made its way into the collection, and they have to figure out how to kind of handle that. But they loved seeing what we had, and they see so much opportunity here. So I know that that really excited them, and they're also totally accustomed to working with cities on a long-term basis. So like, for example, they've worked with different developments in Austin and incorporating art as, into the architecture or at the forefront of the planning process with developments. And so, they had learned about the Baylands. They know a lot about, what's going on at Sierra Point, and they talked about how on an ongoing basis, they can also help us as we're navigating, building out these areas, how we can incorporate art from the very beginning. So it's nice to see that there's a potential for a long-term partnership for them to help us with curation and all sorts of things, if we like the work that they do with us on this project. Did you want to?
I just had a quick question. When you said they showed you art and also this other group of residents, did they show you, I mean, a lot of people will think art, painting on a wall. Did they show you a variety of things from sculptural to, I mean, just a sense of what did they show you?
It was all only public art. So they did murals, they did abstract murals, they did nature themed murals, they did murals with faces. So they did, tons of different types of murals, tons of different types of sculptures. They did infrastructure like lighting that was art, or benches that were art. So things that had multi-purpose. They didn't do any mosaics, which I thought was interesting. And that's something that we pointed out. Like they asked, what's missing from this? What did we not show you that you wish you would have saw? And we all said mosaics because that wasn't in there. And they were like, oh yeah, wow, we didn't realize that was missing. They also showed us things that had lighted components. So are you attracted to this thing? Like that interacts with movement. They also did stuff that would be more interactive for kids, like could incorporate sound, and also like different things that you could install, like telescopes that you could look through and you see something. So we talked about how certain things we felt could be dated over time. We talked about certain things, how like stuff that includes lighting technology, that could feel dated, but that could also require a lot of maintenance. There wasn't a lot of graffiti art. That's also something that we had kind of had a conversation about, graffiti, where that belongs. I would say everything else, sculptures, what else am I missing? There was stuff incorporated like on buildings, big things on buildings. There was stuff small scale, huge scale. So we talked also about scale and what we thought was appropriate. And there were certain things that came up that we were like, oh, this we could see out at the marina. Oh, this we could see on Crocker. So we also talked about locations where we thought things were appropriate. And we would say, oh, that's marina art. But something that you might put out the marina, you might not necessarily put at the community park, especially if it's something of a big scale, right? Because you can balance that out with the size of the buildings that are at the marina. So it was a very in-depth conversation. I would say we must have looked at 40 different photos.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a very good experience. I think everybody left the room feeling fulfilled.
Yeah. And, I just want to make a comment to you guys. So my wife, along with Kevin Fryer and Beth Grossman,
Tom Hanks.
Deanna Wash, Tom Hanks, right? They were part of a stakeholder group,
Keith
Moreau. And the feedback that I got was just fabulous, right? They were super stoked that, that the committee hired this consulting firm to help with the master plan, to really, aid us, guide us in putting out public art, that all the things that you just said, right? Having things that are diverse, appropriate, for the space and just being creative. And so, kudos to both of you for finding this. What is it? Nine
No,
dot art.
that's- I think everybody feels very confident that we made a good choice there, and they certainly shone. This is our first meeting with them, and I think they shone so well. When you think of both groups, loved them. That's a testament to this young firm. Yeah.
Great.
Thanks, Cliff.
And then the liaison to the Complete Streets and Safety Committee is going to be having a meeting on April 3rd. That'll be in our next reports. And then the Public Art Advisory Committee's next meeting is April 15th.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, that Complete Streets Liaisons meeting was canceled,
Oh, okay,
and I have a PCE report,
okay.
very short. Just a couple interesting facts. Peninsula Clean Energy's been meeting with Caltrain to understand PCE rates and power mix, because this is in preparation for the South San Francisco depot that's coming online in September of 2024, the electric cars, which PCE will be providing power for. Also, people ask about new renewable energy projects, and at board meeting, we were updated. The chronic supply chain shortages and also delays in connecting new projects to the grid are bogging things down miserably. I mean, literally like a year, 2 years behind. So all this massive push going forward, and we end up with the same problem. We just can't make it go faster. So that's unresolved, and that's out of our control. Finally, Peninsula Clean Energy staff. The staff's been added to a lot of new employees going great guns. And there's a major analysis of costs that's being considered. And the goal is finding ways that will lower the rates even more than what they are to our customers. Right now, there's a 5% discount from PG&E rates. And they're looking at ways that throughout the course of the year that could go even lower. So there'll be more information on that forthcoming in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other reports? Okay, that will bring us to oral communications number 2. Are there any members of the public who would wish to speak? Seeing none in the room.
Madam Mayor, I just want to note for the record that we received written correspondence from Larson, Leiper, Tainter, Mendez, Laksamana, and Rydell.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry for missing that.
And there are no other, no members of the public wish to make comment, Madam Mayor.
Okay, and with that, I will adjourn the meeting at 8:53 in memory of Father John Baliza.